She cradled her frail newborn, tears blurring her vision as the doctor delivered the devastating verdict, until 5 minutes later, a stranger's checkbook changed everything. Jessica Davis stood in the stark white hospital corridor, the antiseptic smell stinging her nostrils, her hand instinctively tightening on the edge of the rolling bassinet where her newborn son, Noah, lay alarmingly still. Dr. Michael Thompson, his face etched with a professional somberness that offered no comfort, adjusted his glasses. "The tests confirm it, Jessica," he began, his voice low but every word a hammer blow. "Noah has a severe congenital diaphragmatic hernia, a very rare and complicated presentation. Without immediate surgical intervention, an extremely specialized procedure, he won't survive more than a few hours, perhaps a day at most." Jessica's breath hitched, a strangled sound in the sudden silence that pressed in on her, broken only by the distant, rhythmic beeping of unseen machines. Her vision swam with unshed tears, the doctor's face becoming a blur. Noah, so small, so perfect, fighting for every tiny breath. The doctor continued, his tone clinical, devoid of the warmth she desperately craved. "This isn't a common surgery, Jessica. It requires a specific surgical team, advanced equipment we have, but the cost is substantial. The hospital's policy for procedures of this nature, particularly given its rarity and resource intensity, requires upfront financial commitment." He paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Jessica felt her knees weaken, a cold dread washing over her. "Upfront? We barely have enough for rent, let alone a miracle surgery." She looked down at Noah, his chest making tiny labored movements. His skin was so pale, almost translucent. She reached a trembling finger to touch his cheek, a silent vow forming in her heart. "I won't lose you." "How much?" she whispered, the words barely audible. Dr. Thompson named a figure that made her stomach plummet. It was an astronomical sum, more money than she had ever seen, more than she could ever hope to gather in a lifetime, let alone in the few hours Noah had left. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. "There has to be another way," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Payment plans? Insurance might cover some charity?" Dr. Thompson's expression was one of regret, but his stance remained firm. "Your current insurance, unfortunately, has a specific exclusion for this type of experimental and high-cost neonatal intervention. As for charity care, the hospital's discretionary fund for such cases is depleted for the quarter, and the approval process for extraordinary grants takes weeks, sometimes months. Time Noah doesn't have." Before we continue with the story, be sure to let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments. We love learning about our viewers. Now let's get back to the story. Jessica shook her head, a torrent of despair threatening to consume her. No, there must be something. Please, doctor, he's my son. He's everything." She clutched the worn strap of her diaper bag, its cheerful cartoon animals, a stark contrast to the grim reality. Her mind raced, a frantic search for a solution, any solution. His father, he left. My parents, they're struggling too. There's no one. The bustling activity of the neonatal intensive care unit hallway continued around them, nurses striding purposefully, hushed conversations, the clatter of a dropped tray, each sound an agonizing reminder that the world kept moving while hers was shattering. A nurse, Patricia Moore, with kind eyes and a gentle smile, approached, placing a tentative hand on Jessica's arm. "Jessica, dear," she began softly. The doctor's words echoed in her ears. "Won't survive." Jessica felt a wave of nausea. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the harsh fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant, the crushing weight of the prognosis. "He's so tiny. How can I let him die?" She thought of the nursery she'd painstakingly put together in their small apartment, the soft blue walls, the mobile of smiling stars she'd hoped he'd gaze at. All of it felt like a cruel joke now. She opened her eyes, looking directly at Dr. Thompson. "Isn't there anyone who can authorize it? A hospital administrator? Someone who can understand this is life or death?" Her voice rose slightly, a note of desperation creeping in. She felt the prickle of sweat on her palms. To Dr. Thompson's side, a weary sound. Jessica, I've explored the immediate avenues. The head of pediatric surgery is aware. The on-call administrator, Mr. Daniel Martinez, has been consulted. The policy is clear on these ultra-rare, high-cost procedures requiring external funding or confirmed immediate payment if internal extraordinary aid isn't available. I wish I had a different answer for you. My team is ready. Noah is as stable as we can keep him for now, but my hands are tied by these financial constraints for this specific intervention. He looked genuinely pained, but his words offered no lifeline, only a reiteration of the impossible wall she faced. The hope that had flickered within her began to dim, replaced by a chilling emptiness. Nurse Moore squeezed her arm gently. We can make him comfortable, Jessica. We'll do everything possible within those limits. Comfortable? The word felt like a betrayal. He wasn't meant to be made comfortable to die. He was meant to live, to laugh, to grow. Jessica pulled away slightly, the touch suddenly unbearable. She looked back at Noah, his tiny fists clenched. He was a fighter, she knew it. But he couldn't fight this alone. The air in the corridor felt thick, heavy, making it hard to breathe. Each tick of the large clock on the wall seemed to thunder in her ears, counting down the precious minutes of her son's life. The weight of her helplessness was crushing. She imagined calling her mother, the despair that would echo back through the phone. There were no rich relatives, no hidden savings, no sudden windfalls on the horizon. Just the stark, brutal reality of their poverty and the unyielding stance of the hospital's financial gatekeepers. She thought of selling her old car, but that would fetch a pittance, not nearly enough. What can I do? What can anyone do? The bustling sounds of the NICU seemed to fade into a dull roar. Her focus narrowed to Noah, to the faint rise and fall of his chest. I need a miracle. Dr. Thompson shifted his weight, his gaze falling on Noah. We'll keep monitoring him closely. If anything changes, or if you need to discuss anything further, he trailed off, the unspoken words hanging between them. He knew as well as she did that without the surgery, the discussions would soon turn to end-of-life care. The thought sent a fresh spear of agony through Jessica. She couldn't even contemplate it. She just stared at her baby, her heart aching with a love so fierce it was physically painful, a love that was being rendered powerless by a lack of money. Suddenly Dr. Thompson reached into his lab coat pocket, perhaps for a pen or a notepad. As he did, he fumbled, his pager going off at the same instant with a shrill beep that made Jessica jump. His attention momentarily diverted. The cool metal of his stethoscope, which he'd been holding loosely, slipped from his trembling fingers. It hit the polished linoleum floor with a sharp metallic clatter that echoed unnaturally loud in the tense silence that had fallen around Jessica and the doctor. Her heart dropped, the sound a final, shattering symbol of hope slipping away. The clatter of the dropped stethoscope seemed to sever Jessica's last thread of composure. A sob escaped her, raw and ragged, as she watched Dr. Thompson hastily retrieve it. His face flushed. He mumbled an apology, but Jessica barely heard him. She was adrift in a sea of despair, the hospital corridor transforming into a suffocating tunnel of white walls and echoing footsteps. Tears streamed down her face, staining the front of the pale blue, oversized hospital-issued gown she wore over her clothes. It's over. There's nothing. He's going to die. The thought repeated, a cruel mantra in her mind. Nurse Patricia Moore, her expression pained, offered a tissue, which Jessica numbly accepted, her hands shaking too much to effectively wipe her eyes. She fumbled for her phone, her vision blurred. Desperation, a frantic energy inside her. Maybe someone knows someone. Her contact list was short, mostly family members who were in similar financial straits. She scrolled through the names, her thumb clumsy. Her Aunt Carol? No, she was on disability. Her cousin? He just lost his job. The battery icon on her phone blinked red, 5%. No, not now. She tried to dial her mother, her fingers slipping on the screen. The call failed to connect, the low battery signal flashing more insistently. Someone help us. Please, God, someone help us. Each failed attempt, each dwindling percentage point of battery life, felt like another door slamming shut. A woman in a cheerful pink volunteer's vest, Brooke Scott, who had been sorting pamphlets at a nearby information desk, noticed Jessica's visible anguish. She saw the young mother, slumped against the wall, phone in hand, shoulders shaking with sobs, the bassinet with the tiny infant beside her. Brooke's usual bright smile softened into a look of concern. She'd seen a lot of worried families in the hospital, but Jessica's distress seemed particularly acute, raw, and utterly solitary. Hesitantly, Brooke approached, her footsteps soft on the linoleum. "Excuse me, miss," she said gently, her voice calm and kind. "Are you all right? Is there anything at all I can do to help you?" Jessica looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. She tried to speak, but only a choked gasp emerged. She shook her head, a gesture of complete hopelessness. Words seemed inadequate to convey the enormity of her son's plight, the impossible choice she faced. Brooke knelt slightly, trying to meet Jessica's gaze. "My name is Brooke. I'm a volunteer here. If you need someone to talk to, or if there's anyone I can try to contact for you." She trailed off, unsure how to penetrate the wall of Jessica's grief. Jessica just stared at her, then back at Noah, her hand protectively hovering over his tiny form. The silence stretched, filled only by Jessica's quiet, hitching breaths. Meanwhile, in a quieter, more administrative corridor, on a different floor, Mr. James Carter, the CEO of Carter Corp., a major technology firm, was concluding a pre-arranged tour with a senior hospital administrator, Mr. Daniel Martinez. Mr. Carter was in the city for a series of meetings and had scheduled this visit to discuss a potential large-scale philanthropic partnership, perhaps funding a new research wing or advanced medical training programs. They were walking towards the main lobby, Mr. Martinez effusively pointing out recent upgrades, when their path was set to intersect with the periphery of the NTU access hallway. Mr. Carter, dressed in a simple but well-tailored suit, listened politely, though his mind was already sifting through the details of the hospital's proposal. As they neared the turn that would lead them away from the clinical areas, Brooke Scott, the volunteer, caught sight of Mr. Martinez accompanying the distinguished-looking visitor. A sudden, desperate idea sparked in her mind. She knew Mr. Martinez was a key administrator, though often perceived as rigid and focused on the bottom line. Excusing herself quickly from the still sobbing Jessica with a murmured, "I'll be right back, I promise," Brooke hurried towards Mr. Martinez, her pink vest a streak of color against the muted hospital tones. She intercepted them just as they were about to pass the NEQ corridor entrance, her expression urgent. "Mr. Martinez." "Excuse me, sir," Brooke began, a little breathlessly, keeping her voice low but intense. "There's a young mother in the NEQ waiting area. Her baby needs urgent, rare surgery, and she's been told she can't afford it. She's absolutely devastated." Mr. Martinez frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption, especially in front of their important guest. "Miss Scott, this isn't the time or place. Financial matters are handled by the billing department. I'm sure they've explained the policies." He attempted to steer Mr. Carter onward, but his dismissive tone and Brooke's evident sincerity had already caught the visitor's attention. Mr. James Carter, who had a reputation for sharp business acumen but also a less publicized, compassionate side, had overheard key phrases: young mother, urgent, rare surgery, can't afford. He paused, his gaze shifting from Mr. Martinez's increasingly flustered face to Brooke's earnest one. There was a flicker of something, perhaps empathy, perhaps just curiosity, in his eyes. He'd built his company on solving complex problems, and the raw human emotion in Brooke's voice cut through the administrator's bureaucratic deflections. He stopped walking, effectively halting their progression. "What kind of surgery?" Mr. Carter asked quietly, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of authority that made Mr. Martinez visibly stiffen. Mr. Martinez, acutely aware of Mr. Carter's attention, now fixed on the unfolding situation, attempted damage control. "It's a highly specialized neonatal procedure, Mr. Carter, exceedingly complex and regrettably very costly. As I was explaining to Miss Scott, our hospital has clear policies regarding, financial responsibilities for such elective, non-standard interventions. We have excellent support systems, of course, but certain parameters must be met. He waved a vague hand, hoping to gloss over the harsh reality Brooke had presented. He clearly didn't want this potential major donor to get a negative impression of the hospital's compassionate care, yet he was also bound by the very rules he was trying to downplay. Ignoring Mr. Martinez's prevarications, Mr. Carter looked directly at Brooke. "Where is this young mother?" he asked. Brooke, relieved that someone was finally listening, pointed towards the entrance of the NEQ hallway, where Jessica was still slumped, a picture of maternal despair. "Just down there, sir. By the window." Mr. Carter nodded once, a decisive gesture. "Then let's not keep her waiting." He began to walk towards the NEQ area, his pace unhurried but resolute. Mr. Martinez, his face a mask of carefully controlled apprehension, had no choice but to follow, along with a suddenly hopeful Brooke. A hush fell over the normally bustling NEQ hallway as the small group, led by the quietly determined stranger, approached the heartbroken Jessica Davis. The footsteps, measured and purposeful, drew nearer. Jessica Davis, lost in her fog of grief, barely registered them until they stopped. She looked up through tear-filled eyes to see three figures: Nurse Patricia Moore, who had returned to her side and was now offering a cup of water, the officious hospital administrator, Mr. Daniel Martinez, looking even more uncomfortable than before, and a well-dressed older gentleman she didn't recognize. The man's gaze was direct but kind, resting on her with an unexpected gentleness. Mr. Martinez immediately began to speak, a forced, overly solicitous tone in his voice. "Jessica, this is Mr. James Carter. He was, visiting the hospital, and expressed an interest in your situation." Mr. Carter ignored Martinez's fumbling introduction and knelt slightly, much as Brooke had done earlier, bringing himself closer to Jessica's eye level. "My name is James Carter," he said, his voice calm and steady, without any hint of his corporate stature. "I understand your son is very ill. Can you tell me what the doctors have said?" Jessica, startled by his directness and the absence of judgment in his eyes, found herself recounting the devastating diagnosis Dr. Michael Thompson had delivered: the rare defect, the urgent need for the specialized surgery, and the crushing, impossible cost. She spoke in broken sentences, tears still flowing, her voice hoarse with emotion, gesturing towards little Noah in the bassinet. She didn't know who this man was, only that he was listening, truly listening, which was more than most had done. Mr. Carter listened intently to Jessica's fragmented explanation, his expression growing increasingly serious. He glanced at Noah, then back at Jessica. His gaze then shifted to Nurse Moore. "What is the baby's name, and who is the surgeon assigned to this case?" he asked, his tone becoming more focused. "His name is Noah, sir," Nurse Moore replied promptly, "and Dr. Michael Thompson is the pediatric surgeon who diagnosed him and would perform the operation." Mr. Carter nodded, then turned his attention pointedly to Mr. Martinez, who seemed to shrink slightly under the direct scrutiny. "Mr. Martinez," Carter began, his voice still quiet, but now carrying an undeniable edge of authority, "why isn't this child receiving the surgery he clearly needs? What happened to emergency funding or compassionate care protocols for a newborn in critical condition?" Mr. Martinez cleared his throat, visibly flustered. "Mr. Carter, as I tried to explain, this is an exceptionally rare and resource-intensive procedure. It falls outside our standard emergency funding parameters. The specific charitable accounts designated for such extensive interventions have unfortunately been exhausted for this fiscal period, and the approval for a new, unbudgeted allocation of this magnitude would require a lengthy board review. It's not a matter of unwillingness, but of established financial protocols for these highly specialized, almost experimental treatments." He was sweating now, his attempts to justify the hospital's inaction sounding hollow even to his own ears, especially in the face of Jessica's raw grief and the silent, critical infant. It was at this moment that Mr. James Carter chose to clarify his position. "Mr. Martinez," he stated, his voice resonating with quiet power that cut through the administrator's bureaucratic excuses, "I am the CEO of Carter Corporation. My company is considering a significant philanthropic investment in this hospital. However, what I am seeing here concerns me deeply." Martinez's face paled considerably. Carter continued, his gaze unwavering. "This baby, Noah, is having that surgery. Carter Corporation will cover all associated costs, every cent. I want you to contact Dr. Thompson immediately and tell him to prepare his team. There will be no further delays due to financial concerns. Is that understood?" Jessica stared, open-mouthed, her mind struggling to process his words. CEO, Carter Corporation, covering the costs? It felt like a dream. An impossible, miraculous intervention. A strangled sound, half sob, half gasp of disbelief, escaped her. The crushing weight on her chest seemed to lift, replaced by a dizzying, overwhelming wave of relief. Tears welled up again, but this time they were tears of stunned gratitude, of an unbearable burden suddenly, inexplicably lifted. "He's going to live. My baby is going to live." Mr. Martinez, on the other hand, was utterly floored, his jaw practically on the floor. He stammered a "Yes, Mr. Carter, right away, Mr. Carter," and immediately fumbled for his phone, his earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by a frantic desire to comply. Dr. Thompson was located within minutes, already stressed about Noah's deteriorating condition. When Martinez, under Carter's watchful eye, relayed the news that full funding had been secured and the surgery was to proceed immediately, the surgeon's initial shock quickly turned to profound relief and then professional readiness. "We can do this," he affirmed, his voice energized. The nurses and other staff in the ICU, who had witnessed the exchange from a slight distance, were abuzz with astonishment and a renewed sense of purpose. The atmosphere shifted from one of helpless sympathy to one of urgent, hopeful action. The previous cloud of despair over Jessica and Noah had been pierced by an unexpected ray of immense generosity. Within what felt like an impossibly short time, but was perhaps only 20 minutes since Mr. Carter's arrival, Noah was being gently prepared for transfer to the surgical suite. Jessica, her face still wet with a mixture of old and new tears, walked beside the gurney, her hand resting on Noah's tiny blanket-swaddled form. Mr. Carter walked quietly beside her, offering a few simple, reassuring words. "He's in the best hands, Jessica. Dr. Thompson is an excellent surgeon. You just focus on being strong for him." His presence was a calm, steadying force. Mr. Martinez, meanwhile, was conspicuously making calls, his demeanor now one of extreme deference, ensuring every possible administrative hurdle was cleared with lightning speed. The surgery was long and complex, but ultimately Dr. Thompson and his team were successful. Noah's prognosis, once dire, was now hopeful. In the aftermath, Mr. Carter, true to his word, ensured all medical bills were settled by his company. Furthermore, disturbed by the near tragedy and Mr. Martinez's rigid adherence to policy over immediate critical need, he had some pointed discussions with the hospital's board. As a direct result, the hospital undertook a comprehensive review of its emergency and compassionate care funding policies, particularly for pediatric critical cases. They established a new, more accessible emergency fund with a streamlined approval process to ensure that no child's life would hang in the balance due to bureaucratic delays or depleted quarterly budgets again. Mr. Martinez found his administrative role significantly re-evaluated, with new oversight on compassionate care decisions. Jessica never saw Mr. Carter again after that day in the hospital, though a small, anonymous gift basket arrived for Noah a week later. Her son Noah thrived, a healthy, happy baby, his life a testament to a stranger's decisive compassion that arrived in the nick of time, just 5 minutes after all hope seemed lost.